A man is on a commercial flight full of passengers. He essentially hijacks the plane. What does he want? Money and parachutes. And honestly, he doesn't want to hurt anybody. He gets his money, gets his parachutes, and he disappears forever. Never seen again, never found, no trace, no nothing, no missing persons report. It is bizarre. It's actually the only hijacking that's taken place in the United States that is unsolved. It is actually so crazy. So this man named Dan Cooper was flying on this Boeing 727 from Portland to Seattle. He was very woke. He said, I'm going to Pride. No kidding. But he bought a one-way ticket in cash at the airport. And mind you, it is the 70s. So I was kind of thinking about that. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, you really had to literally go to the airport to buy a plane ticket or talk to a travel agent. Like, that is crazy. Imagine not being able to just buy it on your computer really fast. Or like when you land, how do you know someone's there to pick you up? Honestly, think about every step it takes to get to an airport and to get home from an airport, and think about not having any contact with anyone during those moments. Like, how did people do it? I don't know. He was described as a white male in his 40s, dark hair, brown eyes. He was wearing a black suit, loafers, a raincoat, and he sat in the very back of the plane. It was seat 18E. He was in the back of that damn plane. So this flight only had 36 passengers, I believe, because it's like a shorter distance. So right after takeoff, he hands the flight attendant behind him. She's sitting in one of those like jump seats, and she takes the note and she doesn't even read it. She just puts it in her bag. And he's like, because he wants her to read it. And I think she just thinks that he's like giving her his phone number or something, but he turns around and he says, Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb. And so she opened the note, and these aren't the exact words, but basically it just said, I have a bomb in my briefcase and I want you to sit by me. So she goes and sits next to him, and I mean, girly sounds crazy, but she's like, can I see the bomb? I'm only laughing because that is like the most insane thing. I feel like I would be so scared to even look that person's way. And she's like, can I see it? Like that. I don't get it. But he opens his briefcase and there's a device in there that looked like a bomb to her. It was like a large battery with cylinders and wires, and it looked like dynamite. So she's like, okay. Yup, it's a bomb. So he told her his demands are $200,000 in a knapsack specifically, and 4 parachutes. So she goes up to the cockpit, and obviously the pilots are like, well, you're not going back there. Like, you're staying in this cockpit. So she's now there and not next to him anymore. But she and the pilots are worried that he is trying to take hostages, because they're like, why is he asking for 4 parachutes? Like, is he going to take 3 people with him? Like, what's going on? So they have another flight attendant sit next to him so she could be like, you know, the communication or whatever. And her last name is Mucklow. So I think that's how you say it. I'm just going to say Muck. I'm just going to say Muck. Okay. So she sits next to him, and Cooper tells her that when they arrive to the Seattle airport, he wants fuel trucks to meet the plane, and no passengers are allowed to get off until he has the money. But he's like, I will release them once I get the money. I just have to know, like, I got it. So obviously the pilots alert the airport, who alert the police, who alert the FBI. So like now everyone's involved. They're trying to figure out how this is going down. And also the passengers have no idea this is going on. Like, he didn't make it obvious, which honestly is probably the best thing. Like, no one had a clue. They actually were told that they were delayed. They had to fly around for a couple hours because of like mechanical issues or something. So they were like, I'm so sorry, we're gonna have to like delay the landing because of landing problems or something. So they were just circling the air for like 2 hours. The president of the airline, also this airline was called Northwest Airlines. I have never heard of this in my life. It's probably like Delta now or something. Like, I have no idea. Actually, let me look really fast. Oh my God, it literally merged with Delta in 2010. That is so crazy that I just said that. Okay, anyways. So the president of Northwest, now Delta, authorized a payment of the $200,000, and he told all of his employees to just cooperate with Cooper, which is pretty standard practice. I remember I worked retail. I worked at Target for like, I don't know, forever. And anytime we did training, they were like, if someone comes in and is like asking for money or like is robbing, whatever, you just like have to do what they say. I mean, to the most of your ability. And while they were circling for these 2 hours, it seemed that Cooper really knew like the area well. Like, he was kind of making comments of the terrain. And they mentioned some air base that was close to them, and he was like, oh yeah, that's like 20 minutes that way or something. So they're like, okay, wait, is he from Seattle or is he like a outdoor guy? Like, I don't know. Very bizarre. It was also noted that Cooper wasn't really nervous. He didn't seem nervous at all. And he also was pretty nice. Like, he wasn't malicious or rude or mean to anyone. I mean, he did hijack a plane and ask for $200,000, but like, we all have our days, you know? At least he didn't hurt anybody. So Muck actually asked Cooper while she was sitting next to him why he chose this airline, this flight. And I guess he just laughed and he was like, I don't have a grudge against this airline. I just have a grudge. But then he just said it was like the exact flight he needed for this specific scenario. So I'm kind of obsessed that Muck is just talking him up. And I guess they were just kind of chatting. Like, Cooper asked where she was from. He told her. He asked him where he was from. He obviously didn't say. He offers her a cigarette. She's like, oh, I quit, but she obviously accepted one. And I can't imagine what that first drag was like in that stressful situation. Around like 5:45 p.m., they land at the Seattle airport, but Cooper was like, we're gonna land far away from like the main terminals. And they were kind of waiting there for the fuel truck and for somebody to bring these items. And Cooper was like, I only want one person from this company to like come to the plane to deliver this, like nobody else. And the guy's name was Al Lee who did this. And he actually, I guess, changed out of his like work clothes and just put on civilian clothes because he was so paranoid that Cooper would think that he's like a police officer or something. So he was just taking extra precaution and was like, I'm gonna look like a regular ass person. So Al brings the things. Muck is allowed to go to the front of the plane to retrieve these things. She gives him the ransom money and it is 10,000 unmarked $20 bills. Which weighs like 19 pounds. And I'm assuming he's probably a little annoyed because if you catch the drift, I feel like you kind of know where the story's going, and a heavy ass bag or whatever is not ideal to have on you during this. But I actually wasn't positive what unmarked dollar bills were, so I looked it up and this is what it is. So if you're just like me and have no idea, it just says a standard piece of cash whose serial numbers have not been written down or tracked by police, meaning it holds no special tracking or secret physical stamps. And the 4 parachutes he got, 2 were from a local skydiving school and then 2 other ones from like a local stunt guy. But I'm kind of confused. I thought that they definitely would have parachutes at an airport, but like maybe not. Maybe that's actually really stupid. Do they even have parachutes on planes at all? I don't know. So he gets a parachute, he gets the money, he lets the passengers off. As he's there, like counting the money and making sure it's all right, it's a little bit awkward and no one's really talking. And Muck just makes a joke and she's like, can I have some of it? Which is so funny. Like in my mind, this Muck character is like on a sitcom and like a terrible, crazy, scary thing is happening and she's like just making the best of it. But he gives her a pack of bills. He's like, sure. But she's like, oh, I actually can't take it. I was totally kidding. Like it's against company policy. Like it's so funny. She's still like worried about company policy. Ma'am, your plane's getting hacked. She also later said that Cooper tried to tip her and another flight attendant, but they just like can't accept tips for some reason, I guess. So I just thought that was interesting. Cooper asked if like the 6 crew members could stay on board and they take off again. And one of the flight attendants is like, can I grab my bag that's right behind, I guess it was like behind him or something. And he literally was like, he said, yeah, I don't bite. And then 2 flight attendants just asked if they could leave. And he just goes, whatever you girls want to do. Who is this person? While they were refueling the plane, I guess Cooper was like kind of upset because the money was handed in a cloth, not a knapsack. So he's like, great. So I guess he put the money in like an empty parachute bag and like tied it around him or something. One of the flight attendants kind of saw him do this. So then he gives the pilots his like flight plan, what he wants them to do. And he wants them to take a southeast course towards Mexico City at the minimum airspeed possible without stalling and like at or below 10,000 feet. He also wanted to keep the landing gear deployed and he wanted to lower the wing flaps 15 degrees and leave the cabin unpressurized. So he's like really specifically asking for like I don't know. I feel like you just gotta know planes to be asking, what do you mean a 15 degree, huh? I'm very unsure why he'd want the cabin to be unpressurized. I don't understand that one. If anyone has a clue, comment below. So the pilots were like, we can't go all the way to Mexico. Like we're gonna have to make another fuel stop. So he agrees that they can stop at the Reno Tahoe airport in Nevada to refill. Cooper wanted specifically when they took off for the air stairs to be extended. Apparently this was like a very specific plane that had this air stair, but the crew is like, we literally can't do that. Like it is such a hazard. Like we can't. And he was like, it can be done. Do it. And they ended up taking off without it extended because he was just like, fine, we'll do it. I'll have Muck help me while we're in the air. The flight takes off again with a very small crew and Cooper. There were actually 2 fighter jets following this plane because obviously everyone was involved now, the FBI, everybody. But they were pretty far back because they wanted to not be in Cooper's eyesight. Like if they thought if he saw them, he might do something crazy, obviously. So they were trailing behind, but like kind of far away. And after they took off, I mean, their biggest fear was that he was going to jump out of the plane with a parachute, but leave the bomb on board and like detonate it before he jumped off or something. That was their big fear. Because they were like, okay, he's asking for parachutes. He wants the air stairs down. He's obviously jumping out of this bitch. So after takeoff, Cooper asked Muck to lower the air stair. And she's like, I'm too scared. Like I could get sucked out of this plane. Like can I tie myself with something to a chair? And he's just like, no, you can't tie yourself to a chair. Like, you have to help me do this. And she kept suggesting things to like keep her safe or whatever. And he eventually was just like, just go to the cockpit. I'll do it myself. But while she's heading to the cockpit, she's just like begging him to take the bomb with him. She's like, please do not leave the bomb on the plane. And so he tells her, he's like, I will disarm it or take it with me. So he's letting her know everything will be okay. She stays in the cockpit the rest of the flight. So now it's just Cooper in the cabin and everyone else in the cockpit. Around 8 p.m. in the cockpit, the air stair warning had been flashing, like alerting them that it had been deployed. So they were like, oh shit, it's happening. They ask him over the intercom if he needs assistance. These people are too nice. Do you need assistance? But he didn't say anything, so they were just like, okay. So as they were landing, they were unsure if Cooper was still on board. They used the intercom to ask him if he could put the air stair back before they landed so they could land safely, and they didn't hear anything. And apparently Muck asked him a bunch of times over the intercom to put it back, and he obviously wasn't there anymore, so he wasn't there to answer, and obviously he had already jumped out of the plane, okay? At 11:02 p.m., the plane lands in Reno. The FBI, state troopers, deputies, etc., created a perimeter around the plane just in case Cooper and or the bomb was still in the area on the plane. So apparently they didn't search the plane right away, but the pilot did. The pilot searched the cabin and confirmed he was gone. After about 30 minutes, the FBI bomb squad confirmed that he was not in the plane. CBS was doing a story on this. It says on CBS Evening News, Walter Cronkite reported that the suspect's name as D.A. Cooper, and in a rush to meet a deadline, reporter James Long of the Oregon Journal recorded the name Dan Cooper as D.B. Cooper. They actually republished that error and said Dan Cooper, but D.B. Cooper was spreading so quickly that it just became like the name. Like everyone just knew that story and knew that person as DB Cooper. So at this point, they have no idea where this guy could be. The other thing is when this plane was going to Mexico, they were flying it manually, which normally they're an autopilot. I believe takeoff and landing is usually the only like manual flying of commercial flights. But this whole thing was manual, so it wasn't as easy to like track the exact course of the flight. And obviously this was the 70s, so it's not like a bunch of technology was available to retrace the steps or whatever. There were a lot of environmental factors happening with location and altitude. The estimated speed of the plane wasn't like 100% correct, and it varied throughout the whole time. And also, DB Cooper is the only person who knows how long he free fell before pulling the cord. So all of those factors combined, they're like, this man could be literally anywhere. The fighter jets also did not see anybody jump from the plane, but it was like the middle of the night in pitch black. So like, he was also wearing a black suit. So there was not much evidence left on the plane at all. He had a clip-on black tie, which I'm like, you're doing all this and wearing a clip-on? 8 cigarette butts, and he left 2 parachutes on board. So he took 2 with him, and he jumped out of that damn plane. So all we really know about this is what I just told you, and also the pilot said about 5 to 10 minutes after their last contact with Cooper in the cabin when they were on the intercom, there was like a quick fluctuation in the flight, like a weird vibration. It kind of like went up for a sec, and it could be an indication that that's when he like jumped out. So there's a flight path. It's called Victor 23, okay? I only know this because of the story, obviously. Apparently that's like the only flight path that they could take with that altitude. So they kind of had a vague sense of like maybe where he could have jumped out and landed maybe. They were like, maybe it's north of Portland. They do a huge search of the area, and it's not an easy, like it is forest and mountains, okay? Like tall ass trees. It is a difficult search. They have helicopters, planes, ground troops, volunteers, like people looking everywhere. Nothing is found. It was also not great weather. Like it was really cold and windy. It just like wasn't a good time. So this I took right from Wikipedia, but I think it's interesting. In March of 1972, after a joint investigation, the FBI determined Cooper probably jumped over the city of La Center, Washington. In 2019, the FBI released a report detailing the burglary of a grocery store store about 3 hours after Cooper jumped near Hyzen, Washington. Hyzen, an unincorporated community, was within the calculated drop zone that Northwest presented to the FBI. In the report, the FBI noted the burglar only took survival items such as beef jerky and gloves. I mean, this sounds like him, right? However, the report also noted the burglar wore military-type boots, while Cooper was described as wearing slip-on shoes. So about a month after they're searching, finding nothing, the FBI is focused on this $200,000. They're like, let's trace any of these $20 bills. Northwest got the $200,000 from Seattle First National Bank. And apparently at this bank, they have a ransom package that they have set aside. Are we okay as a country? They set aside $250,000 in case they need it for this exact situation, I guess. So they do have the serial numbers. He asked for them to be untraced. I'm assuming they look untraced. I don't really know how they set it up, but I'm assuming they make it look untraceable, but they're actually obviously traced because it is a part of their ransom package that they have set aside in case for something like this. And these numbers were made available to the public, business institutions, financial institutions, casinos, racetracks, like anywhere people are spending a large amount of money. They basically wanted to make it as difficult as possible for him to spend the money. They even had a reward. If somebody had the matching serial number, they would get $25,000. But no one ever saw any of that specific money he was given that day until about 10 years later in 1980, a young boy named Brian was on vacation with his family, and he was like digging in the sand. He was at the beach digging in the sand to make a campfire or something. He found buried cash totaling $5,880. It was 3 bundles of cash. The rubber bands were still intact around the bills. The parents brought the cash to the FBI, and it matched the exact bills that were part of D.B. Cooper's ransom money that he got. But the place they found the cash was so far from where he jumped out. The only theory that kind of made sense was like maybe when he was like jumping out, some of it dropped and fell in a river and like floated down a really long ways and washed ashore to a beach or something. But that was not possible because the river flows in an opposite direction. So they're just like, huh? The conclusion the police kind of came up with though is that he did bury that money at some point in that area. But there were a lot of people who also was like, no way did he even survive that jump. It was apparently so cold and windy when he jumped out. The wind was so violent that they found a little like sign that was on the air stair, like on the ground below the flight path. It had ripped off like a sign that was bolted into the thing. So I don't know. Cooper was also not dressed for the cold at all. He was wearing loafers and like a trench coat. It was also really cloudy, so as soon as he jumped out of the plane, he probably could not see what was below him right away, so no idea where he was. And apparently he was using a non-steerable parachute. So when they gave him the 4 parachutes, I guess they unintentionally gave him 1 dummy parachute. So he literally had one that didn't even work. And then the other one he took with him was like the oldest parachute they had. So there was 2 left on the plane after he jumped, like I said earlier. And by context clues, they figured out he took the dummy one and the really old one. So they're like, even if he did jump out, A, he could have attached the dummy one to himself and didn't even survive. Or B, maybe it didn't even work because it was old, didn't hold up. They thought maybe he took the dummy parachute knowingly and put the money in it and attached that to him. Like they weren't really sure exactly what he did with the parachutes. So like I said, he took the dummy one and the old one. The old one was also a military parachute. I guess the other 2 were like civilian luxury parachutes you used for fun. So then they were like, maybe he has CIA links, like maybe he was a part of the CIA. And also this aircraft, it's a Boeing 727, is the exact same make and model of the aircraft they used in the Vietnam War when they would drop things to Vietnam because of that specific stairway. So they were like, maybe he chose this because it's an easy escape for him. Like he learned it from the CIA and he just knew how to do it. I mean, like I said earlier, he did say it was the exact flight he needed. So maybe he did see the air stair and was like, I'm taking that one. And very weirdly, no missing persons report was ever reported about this guy, which could mean he just went back to his normal life after he landed and probably camped for a couple days or weeks. I don't know. So they have 0 evidence of anything still. They do interview so many suspects throughout now and then. I mean, I'll talk about a couple of them that are pretty interesting. One man, his name was Robert Rackstraw. He was an Army paratrooper. He had a criminal record. He had an uncle named John Cooper, and he was an avid skydiver. He was discharged from the Army 5 months before this hijacking, and he never denied being Cooper. Like, it's very odd. but his eyes were very light colored, and it is well known that Cooper had dark colored eyes. And this man was only 28 at the time, and these flight attendants were like, no, this guy was definitely in his 40s. So there was another guy named Kenneth Christensen. In 2003, his brother thought there were similarities. So his brother in 2003 is literally like, I'm turning this bitch in. Like, are we kidding? But this Kenneth person had a military background. He worked for Northwest Airlines before and after this hijacking. He was about 45 years old when this hijacking took place, and he was left-handed, and it was noted that Cooper was using his left hand most of the time to open his briefcase and to, I don't know, do stuff. So they were like, oh, this man's probably left-handed. So that was a little interesting. And he also told his brother before he died, he said, there's something you should know, but I can't tell you, which would honestly really piss me off if that was my brother. And after he died, the family found $200,000 in his bank account. But he definitely looked like the sketches of DB Cooper, but his height and his hair were like wildly off. And his family was like, well, he's sold a lot of land. So I guess that's like how he made the $200,000. There's also a man a year later named Richard McCoy, and he hijacked the plane the same way Cooper did. I believe this guy, though, had like a grenade and a bullet or something, but it was similar. Like, he used a fake name, he had an explosive device, he had handwritten notes. Apparently both of them would say no funny stuff a lot. And he asked for $500K and 4 parachutes. And that man jumped out where the stairs are as well. And he had served in the Vietnam War as a helicopter pilot. So this man, he jumped out with a parachute. He survived, and he avoided authorities for 2 days. He died in 1974 and never confirmed or denied it was him. So it's honestly really pissing me off that all these people are like, I don't know, am I him? Like, shut up. But this man, in a different way, he seemed like he was a very experienced skydiver. He even brought a helmet and like a jumpsuit with him, which DB did not do. He chose a very specific flight path that he knew existed. He had a different weapon. He was 29 years old, and flight attendants don't think he was Cooper at all, but they thought he was probably a copycat for sure. And the last one I found that was pretty interesting, his name is William Smith. He wasn't a suspect until 2018, but he fought in World War II. He was 43 years old at the time that it was hijacked, and he looked like DB Cooper. I think they actually had an age progression photo of what he probably looks like now, or 2018, and this guy kind of looked like it. So that was interesting. And it was also noted that in 1970, the company that this guy worked for filed for bankruptcy, meaning he was losing his pension. And this guy also worked for railroad companies. So, I mean, maybe he was pissed at airlines. He's like, I don't like that you guys exist now, because now you're making so much money, I don't even get my pension anymore. And they thought maybe he used his railroad knowledge to escape after he landed. I don't know, but it was proven that he spent all of his life in like the northeastern part of the US. But it was interesting because DB's clip-on tie, attached to the tie was a little gold clip, and FBI figured out that this specific clip-on tie was only sold at JCPenney's, and it was discontinued in 1968. And while they were doing tests on this tie, they found metal and rare earth particles. So I'm just going to read this directly off Wikipedia because I'm no scientist, okay? I'm just gonna read it. The metal and rare earth particles suggested Cooper may have worked for Boeing or another aeronautical engineering company at a chemical manufacturing plant or at a metal fabrication and production facility. There were also 2 pieces of hair left on his seat, okay? One of them lacked enough characteristics for them to even test on. I don't know if it was long enough or what, but they couldn't test on it. And then the other piece of hair, they were keeping for future comparisons to do DNA testing, but they lost it by 2002. So the investigators or whatever had lost the hair by 2002. So was this not only like the most bizarre hijacking thing ever, but they're also now losing evidence, any evidence they have. He also left cigarette butts because, like I said, you could smoke on the planes back then. The FBI sent them to a crime lab, but they were unable to find any fingerprints and returned them to the Las Vegas field office. But in 1998, the FBI wanted to extract DNA to maybe match it to somebody. They realized that the cigarette butts had been destroyed in the office. So, like I said, any evidence, any small piece of evidence, gone. So there's obviously many theories of who this guy is or where he is, or I mean, there's so many questions around this, it still has not been solved, which is actually crazy. But the FBI thinks maybe he was an Air Force veteran. They also didn't think he was like a common criminal who was like doing this stuff all the time because of the way he was communicating. He quickly adapted to situations as they changed and would never get like really mad. So they were like, this guy has like a lot of self-control. So another interesting theory is in Canada, I think they only sold it in Canada, but it was a French comic that was called Dan Cooper. It was a comic book about a pilot in Canada, and literally on the front of one of these comic books, it's this Canadian pilot, Dan Cooper, who's literally seen in parachutes, like flying through the air. So it's pretty crazy. They're like, maybe he's a Canadian. Maybe he just like hid his accent. Maybe he speaks French also because of this comic book. Who knows? They also claimed, he said, when he was asking for the money, he wanted negotiable American currency when asking for the money. But they don't know if that's a direct quote. Some other people are like, no, he just said he wants $200K cash. Another thing noted was he spilled the only drink he had on the flight, which I feel like you can't really determine anything from that, but the FBI thinks he was not a heavy drinker or an alcoholic, like at all. And they think he smoked like a pack of cigarettes a day based on the amount of cigarettes he smoked on the flight. But, you know, it was a stressful situation. Maybe he was smoking more than normal. Who knows? Let's not smoke shame DB Cooper. He also was very aware of, like, leaving evidence, even though he did leave his tie, which is weird, and cigarette butts. But any of the notes he gave out, he asked for them back because he knew he didn't want to leave them. And also, when he offered Muck a cigarette, she used one of his matches to light it, and he asked for the match back. So he was really, like, nothing's staying on this plane, even though he left cigarette butts. Also, him specifying the 15-degree flap thing on the plane for the wings was so odd. It says from Wikipedia, unlike most commercial jet airliners, the 727 could remain in slow, low altitude flight without stalling. The flap setting Cooper specifically requested allowed him to control the 727's airspeed and altitude without entering the cockpit, where he could have been overpowered by 3 pilots. And the pilot also told the FBI, he was like, this Cooper guy, like, he knows a lot about flying an aircraft in general. So he also knew specifically that this air stair could be operated during flight, which is pretty rare. Like, he knew that if he put the air stair down, the pilots weren't going to override it because they weren't able to for some reason. He already knew that, and he knew how to operate it. And he just seemed extremely familiar with parachutes. If this man is still alive, I would love for him to just come out. And I mean, I wish that because no one was hurt, they could just be like, well, statute of limitations. Like, wouldn't that be such a good documentary? I feel like for the sake of the people, if he's still alive, they need to drop the case and give us a documentary. I genuinely have no idea what to think. My first thought is he probably didn't survive the jump. And also imagine if this person just went back to their normal life. Like, they just got to live out the rest of their life. $200K richer, just pulling off this hijacking, the only one that's never been solved in America. Hope you guys like this video. Please subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment if you want me to cover anything specifically. I'm glad a lot of you are really liking this because it's not like scary. I don't know. I don't really care about like murders and true crime in the literal sense. I just love these weird ass stories. So I'm glad you guys are liking them and also able to watch them if you don't really like true crime or you don't like the serious true crime. It's pretty chill over here, but we do have a lot of liars on our hands. So, all right, I love you guys. I'll see you when I post next. Bye.